And I am the, I guess, special assistant to the general manager slash scouting to John Daniels with the Texas Rangers at present.
Very good. And Don, what has your history in scouting been? So when did you first begin scouting? Who have you scouted with, and what have your different positions in scouting been?
Well, it's interesting, John. I started out, I was in education, and I was a basketball, baseball coach both in high school and college. I was an assistant principal. I was a dean of men at Concordia Lutheran Junior College in Ann Arbor, Michigan. But all the while, I was scouting in some capacity. I initially scouted as a associate scout, which was a non-paid position, just to help out a couple of the scouts that I had known. And that worked out well, and that evolved into part-time scouting, and then eventually I did off-season for education, which is summers, tryout camps for the Kansas City Royals Baseball Academy. We went all over the country and did that, and that all evolved into a full-time scouting job and started with the Toronto Blue Jays pretty much at their inception, 1977. And since then, I've been with the Blue Jays. I was with the Blue Jays for a long time, and Pat Gillick, and Pat went to the Orioles, and I went with Pat. He wanted me to go with him to the Orioles, so I did. And Pat went to Philadelphia and did that, and then went to the Texas Rangers 6 years ago, and I've had an absolute blast every minute of it. Love my job, love the profession, love everything that it brings, love the challenges and so on. And at present, we're having a lot of fun with the Texas Rangers.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that baseball academy and what its purpose was, and whether any players came out of the baseball academy?
Yeah, very interesting, John. The Baseball Academy was the brainchild of Ewing Kauffman, who was the owner of the Kansas City Royals at that time. And he had a fellow named Sid Thrift, who was a longtime baseball guy, and another guy named Steve Korchek, who was an educator slash ex-catcher slash definite baseball guy, good baseball people. And those guys, along with others, evolved the concept of a baseball academy. We went all over the country doing tryout camps. We hired a man named Sam Ketchman to do all the public relations and so on, and publicize the camps. And the reason and the focus, the philosophy involved there, John, was that we're going to try to find people that are not involved in the draft, or are not drafted, or are passed over, or are there really athletes out there that can play in the major leagues that are not the big high-profile guys that can be found in any nook, in a nook and cranny somewhere along the way. And the situation was very successful, actually. Frank White lived a couple blocks from the ballpark at Kansas City, and he was a definite, one of the academy guys, and what a great player he turned out to be. Many others, I'd say there were 10 or 11 other guys, UL Washington, Sheldon Mallory, Winston Cole. There were a lot of guys that come to mind. They all played in the big leagues. And our manager with the Texas Rangers, Ronnie Washington, was a Kansas City Royal Baseball Academy guy, signed as a 5'7", 135-pound catcher, ended up being a shortstop infielder in the major leagues for a long time. And now he's managing our club. So it was a real interesting situation, and it was fun to be part of. And Dominican now, every team, when I was with the Blue Jays, John, it was Blue Jays and the Dodgers dominated Dominican Republic, because we had Epi Guerrero and they had Ralph Avila. And they dominated the Dominican Republic as far as acquiring players. Now, today, and we all had academies. The Blue Jays had Epi Guerrero's academy, and the Dodgers had their own academy, which was elaborate, which had their own cattle on the farm. They built their own complex. The kids all lived there. They had their own meat from the food. They made their own food. They had chefs. It was an elaborate thing. And our Blue Jay thing wasn't as elaborate, but it was the same idea. The kids are signed. They lived there. They did baseball 24 hours a day. They work out in the morning. They work on strength things in the afternoon. They go back and play games late afternoon. They play against other academies or themselves or whatever. At night they do English classes. It's like a parental type thing. And today, John, almost every team has an academy down there, and they love baseball in Dominican Republic, Venezuela, those countries absolutely love it. So it's a fun environment there also.
How did you, did somebody teach you something about scouting? Was there any kind of formal training that you went through, or was there a scout or scouts in particular that really sort of taught you the ropes, and go from there?
Yeah, there was a scout up in Walworth, Wisconsin. I was originally from Harvard, Illinois, so I tell people I graduated from Harvard, which I did, you know, but Walworth, Wisconsin was about 10 miles away, and Dale McReynolds lived up there, and he was a scout for many years with the Dodgers and so forth, and he had scouted me. So at times he would invite me up to his house, and we'd have coffee or Coke or whatever and just talk baseball in his office. He had an office full of pictures, memorabilia, scouting cards. He was a very dedicated guy, and we would talk baseball, and I would learn about the scouting aspect, and once I got started into scouting, just helping people, once I got into education and was starting just as an associate scout, then you start thinking about the reports thing, and when you see a guy you like, and to this day I believe that it's instinct just like it is with a player. You either have that ability to discern that they can or cannot play, or you don't, basically. But you fine-tune those instincts through writing reports and through whatever. And I was once told, and I never forgot this, and I tell our young scouts now with the Rangers, that the only way the general manager really has to know about you is to read what you put down on a written report, because he's not going to be around you all the time. Same with your scouting director. So what? You've got to make a picture. You've got to draw a picture of that player written in a written form so that they totally understand where you're coming from and how you write and whatever. I know we initially started with the Blue Jays, and Pat Gillick would call. We only had a few scouts and we had big areas. So he would call every day. What'd you see? What do you like? What this and that? And he would know by the tone of your voice who you like, how you like, whatever. But in this day and age, it's not like that. And there's not that much contact. But you write reports, you got to draw a picture of the player in a written form.
Tell me, Don, about a player that you saw, that you scouted. Maybe you signed him, maybe you didn't, but was there a time when you saw a player that just made you say, this is why I'm a baseball scout, because I like that fella, and maybe somebody who ended up doing pretty well afterwards?
Yeah, well, there's a few. The one that I did not get that I'll always remember is Jim Abbott. In high school, drafted Jim Abbott, and drew up my list for right before the draft, and he was number 1 on my list. He was ahead of Barry Larkin and everybody else, and I tried to keep him under wraps, and I think did. But the night before the draft, I called his house, and Jim, and I hadn't talked much to Jim, but I called his house the night before the draft and asked him, who has talked to you in the last few days? Do you expect to be drafted by who, and this and that, whatever. And after talking to Jimmy, he said, no, I'm going to University of Michigan. And he said, no one has talked to me. And I said, well, even Detroit, which is your hometown, team and so on, Detroit hasn't talked? No, sir. He said, no one has talked to me. So even though I had him first on my list, I called Pat and said, we can draft him anywhere we want. I'm convinced that no one is going to draft him. So we took him in the 36th round. And all summer tried to sign Jim Abbott. To this day, loved the family, just tremendous people, tremendous relationship with Jimmy. But Jimmy did not sign, and we offered him $50,000 plus college, which at that time was quite a bit, and way above 36. It was up there in the top 5 round type money at that time. But Jimmy went on to college, University of Michigan. His mom had been a lawyer at University of Michigan and so forth, and his dad was a beer distributor and just a good old guy. Still to this day, we stay in touch. But anyway, Jimmy went to University of Michigan, was taken in the first round 3 years later, and had a great story and did a great job in the major leagues. Now, he recently wrote a book called Imperfect, and he sent me a copy of that book and so on, and he called, and I said to Jim, I said, Jim, I said, you're one of the most interesting stories I've had in all my scouting. And I said, and then we tried hard to get you in 1992 at the winter meetings in Louisville, and you ended up going to the Yankees, and Whitey ended up trading you to the Yankees. And I said, but all along the way, I said, we've never been on the same team. I said, what's that all about? And he said, well, Mr. Welke, he said, he said, that's the way it worked out. He said, but we're certainly together in spirit. So Jim Abbott was a great story, one that we did not get. John Olerud, we did signed to a contract, a tremendous guy, an All-American type kid, and so forth. And Willie Blair was a guy with the Blue Jays when I was there that we signed, and Dave Steve, who also was a 20-game winner and tremendous pitcher in the major league for the Blue Jays. And got involved with Sean Green after we had signed him with the Blue Jays. And I've been very fortunate, John, to have worked and been with and signed and been around all-American type people. I mean, you're talking Jim Abbott, you're talking John Olerud, you're talking Josh Hamilton definitely was instrumental in really pushing to sign Josh Hamilton with the Texas Rangers. Same with Adrian Beltre. We had known him from the Dodgers and, had pushed for Adrian also. And I've just been around, the All-American type guy. Pat Henkin, as I had mentioned to you, he called me this morning congratulating on an award. And it's just it's very meaningful to have that type. We emphasize makeup a lot with the Texas Rangers, and I think you can see that on the field a little bit. But we emphasize that, and I've always felt that. So you go back to some of these kinds of players, and wow, I mean, they're just first-class citizens, people as well. So,
can you talk a little bit about the importance of makeup and how you, as a scout, figure out whether the boy has it or not?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good question, and it's exactly right. There are some guys that show you on the field that they have the makeup that it takes to make it work. Pat Henkin was that way. He was a competitor. Jim Abbott was that way. They jumped out at me on the field. John Olerud, very quiet, but very competitive, but you had to get to know him. But to answer your question, there are a few that show you makeup on the field that jump out, but very few. So you've got to do your homework. You've got to find out what do the mom and dad do? What are the habits of the kid? What are his off-the-field interests? What are his desires? What are his, what's his academic status? What's his, does he want to go to college? Is he more interested? How much does he want to play this game? How much is it down there deep? And when I scouted, John, it was something that, for example, Pat Henkin never got a card from me that said fill out an information card. And when we drafted Pat, he was, wow, the Toronto Blue Jays, It was a surprise type thing. You wanted to keep keep everything secretive so that, not necessarily secretive, but you didn't want other teams to be in on guys you liked. And so it was a natural thing that if you paid a lot of attention to the family, this, that, and the other, that the word gets around, oh, the Blue Jays are talking to my son, this, that, or the other. But I found out everything I needed to know about Pat, for example, without ever talking to anybody other than sneaking and listening to his teachers or finding out in different ways. Today, it's a lot different, but makeup, you've got to find out, and we do that a lot with the Rangers, and we put our area scouts in a position that you're responsible to know the makeup, know the family, know the desires, know the signability, know the ability, of course. And makeup is huge. When I scouted, it's always been big to me, but initially I scouted, it was about 75% physical talent, 25% makeup. Today, definitely physical talent is the most important, but I might go 51% talent, 49% makeup. Because man, that when it gets tough, and it is tough, people think it's easy to be a major league player. No way. It's a tough grind, and you're going against a lot of people. So when it gets tough, it's the heart and the desire and the makeup that comes out in a young man. And when God gave a guy ability and he can get the most out of it through his makeup, you got a real total package type thing.
How do you feel about the fact that scouts have kind of been the unsung heroes behind the scenes? Is that a role that you think scouts are fine with, or do you feel like they get enough credit for what they do?
Yeah, John, it's like functions like this where all the scouts get together, the winter meetings, all the baseball people get together, and there is a major recognition of baseball scouts. Excuse me. It's probably the only function other than the one in Los Angeles around Christmas time that scouts are actually given the recognition that they deserve. Scouts work hard. They work very hard, and they are a fraternity, even though the guy next to me, if he works for another team, he's the enemy. But you still understand what we each do. And it is a lot of work. It is a lot. The dedicated scout is very difficult to match, so to speak. And scouts really do not get a lot of public recognition, and in this day and age, especially with the advent of agents and the advent of the different technical aspects of the game and so forth, the game has changed a lot. But back when I scouted, the area scout was the guy in an organization. And if a guy were drafted in the first round, the area scout would be responsible to sign him, to take him to the parent club, to talk to him, to get the paperwork done and the signing done. Today, it's more agents, it's more, we want to talk to the scouting director, no, maybe the assistant general manager, no, maybe the general manager, the president, whatever. And the monies have changed a lot. The game has changed a lot, but the scout is still the same guy out there. And the real guys in scouting are the area scouts, because there's professional scouting, there's advanced scouting, there's international scouting, there's all kinds of different scouting. But the area scouts are the guys that need to uncover those rocks and find those guys. And again, another change in scouting today, you've got all the different showcases and this, that, and the other. So supposedly everybody there, you don't find people under rocks anymore, but I don't believe that. And why hire a guy if he can do what anybody else can do by going to showcases, this, that, and the other? You've got to get guys that are hungry to go out and find other ways, to find other guys, to beat that just total system that has, everybody in one place all the time, so to speak.
Where would baseball be without scouts?
Yeah, good question. Video in baseball is not near what it is in football. They don't have the games on the television all the time, and it's not the same as being there if they are on television. So without scouts, I don't know. I'm guessing it would all be technology. It would all be get those names in a computer and try to mash out those names and get those statistics in there and try to do it that way. But you can't do it without scouts. Scouts are, there's much more involved in that, as we talked about. We talked about the family, getting to know the kid, getting to know the inside, knowing the area, being around the school principal, the coaches, and so forth. And scouts are the lifeblood of this game, and that's why, you know, I know you're in Cooperstown, and I was fortunate enough to be there a couple of years ago at Pat's induction, and that is grassroots baseball. That is tremendous. It's pure baseball, and it's always great for a scout to be able to come up with someone that no one else has seen, or to be able to make a judgment on someone that is correct, even though everyone else has seen him and, you know, feels that way, and even make a judgment that this guy cannot play when a guy is heralded to be a guy who has to be a great player. So there's a great amount of discernment involved in scouting, and it's just such a great. They are the lifeblood of the game. I do believe scouts are the lifeblood of the game, and I believe they always will be, no matter what happens. There's got to be a baseball scout in an area to flesh out the players, and in order to be successful today, you have to have the players come into the system initially that can play. Now, you develop those players, and the organizations that have their own players are far ahead of the organizations that don't. So the more players you can get that really can play and have the ability to play in the major leagues, you know, the better team you're going to have. You can't win through trades totally. You can't win through free agency. You can't win through the draft. You win through the draft scouting well. You win through international scouting. You win through trades, and you win through free agency altogether. For example, with the Rangers, we went over to Texas and talked with John Daniels, and John, and we talked about, John, it would be a good idea to go to Mr. Hicks and change the landscape here from the aspect that let's put our money into player development and scouting, and let's not go crazy on one or two free agent players every year and try to buy people in to mold a team. Let's put all our money into scouting and player development, and let's try to build something. And John basically said, give me 4 years with my group, and let's see what we can do with it. And within 4 years, we were in the World Series. So then we were in the World Series the year after that. Now, last year we stumbled a little bit, but we have built a farm system, and we have done it through player development and scouting. Now, how do you, when you get to a certain point, we said, Mr. Hicks, we're not interested in going free agent until or unless we get to a point where we think one free agent might take us over the top to win the whole thing. And we were fortunate enough, even though the team was bankrupt at that time, to get Cliff Lee, who came over with us. And, you know, we went into the postseason that year. The next year, Adrian Beltre was the guy we thought could take us over the top. And last year, it was Yu Darvish who we thought could take us over the top. So we've gone a little bit in that direction, but if we didn't have our own scouts and our own system developed to the point where we could feel that one guy can help take us the rest of the way, you know, we'd have never been in a position like that.